The fires never stopped burning on Kepler 4 to be. Commander Vexai pressed his three-fingered hand against the cracked window of his command bunker and watched his world die. The sky glowed orange with smoke and ash. Where the great cities of his people once stood, only twisted metal and burning ruins remained. The Void Swarm had been hunting his people for 3 months now. Their black ships moved like hungry insects across the surface of his planet, eating everything in their path. Buildings, trees, people, even the ground itself disappeared into their terrible machines. Nothing could stop them. Vexa turned away. From the window, his officers sat at their posts, their blue-scaled faces gray with exhaustion and fear. They had tried everything. Their best weapons barely scratched the enemy ships. Their strongest shields lasted only minutes against the swarms. Attacks. The Zephyrian military, once proud defenders of their peaceful world, had been crushed in the first week of fighting. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we have lost contact with the northern cities. All of them." Vexai nodded slowly. He had expected this news. The swarm moved in patterns, consuming everything in organized sections. Soon they would reach this bunker too. Soon, his people would be nothing but memories scattered in the wind. But there was one last thing he could try. One desperate chance that the old laws of the galaxy might save them. "Open the emergency protocols," he ordered. "Find the universal distress beacon." His officers looked at him with surprise. The beacon was ancient technology, written into galactic law thousands of years ago. It was meant to call for help when a species faced complete extinction. But no one had used it in living memory. Most worlds preferred to handle their own problems. "Sir, the beacon will broadcast to every civilized world in the galaxy," his tactical officer warned. "But most species stopped fighting wars long ago. They may not even remember how to help us." Vexai walked to the main console. The beacon controls were covered in dust. Warning signs in a dozen languages told of the serious nature of this call. Once activated, it would mark the Zephyrians as a dying race, begging for salvation from strangers. "If we do nothing, we die anyway," he said. "It's at least this way someone might remember us." He entered his command codes with steady hands. The beacon came to life with a deep humming sound. Data flowed across the screens as the system prepared to send their cry for help across the stars. The message would travel faster than light, reaching distant worlds in hours or days. The beacon launched its signal into space just as explosions rocked the bunker. The Void Swarm had found them far across the galaxy. On a small blue world called Earth, Captain Jake Morrison was having the worst day of his career. His ship, the UES Defiant, was humanity's first real starship capable of traveling between star systems. It was supposed to be a simple patrol mission to test their new faster-than-light engines. Instead, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. The navigation system kept glitching. The artificial gravity made strange noises. 2 of his crew members were sick from the jump through hyperspace. And now, just as they were preparing to return home, every alarm on the ship started screaming at once. "What now?" Jake muttered, pulling himself into the captain's chair. The bridge was small and cramped, nothing like the giant starships in old movies. Everything was painted military gray and built for function, not comfort. "Captain, we're picking up some kind of signal," reported Lieutenant Amy Davis from the communications station. "It's not coming from Earth." Jake felt his stomach drop. First contact with aliens was supposed to happen under controlled conditions. With diplomats and scientists present, not with a half-broken patrol ship in the middle of nowhere. "What kind of signal?" he asked. Amy frowned at her instruments. It's a distress call, sir." Universal mathematical patterns, repeating over and over. "And Captain, the signal is incredibly powerful. Whatever sent this wanted to make sure everyone in the galaxy heard it." Jake stared at the main screen, which now showed strange symbols and numbers scrolling past. Somewhere out there, someone was calling for help. Someone was dying. "Can we trace where it came from?" "Yes, sir. It's from a star system about 40 light-years from here." "The signal is still fresh, maybe a few hours old," Jake thought quickly. The Defiant was not a warship, carried only basic weapons and a crew of 30 people. If there really was some kind of galactic emergency happening, they were probably the worst possible ship to respond, but they were also the only human ship this far from Earth. "Send a message back to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them what we found, full details." While Amy worked on the transmission, Jake studied the alien distress signal. The mathematics were simple enough that any spacefaring species could understand. Them pictures showed a world under attack by dark insect-like ships. The final image made his blood run cold. It showed the planet's population dropping from billions to thousands in real time. Someone was committing genocide on a scale that made human wars look like children's games. "Message sent, Captain Amy," reported. "But it will take almost 3 days to reach Earth, and another 3 days to get a response." Jake nodded. In 6 days, whatever was happening on that distant world would be over. The aliens sending the distress call would be dead, and humanity would have missed its first chance to help someone else in the galaxy, unless they acted now. "Plot a course for the source of that signal," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed." His crew turned to stare at him. Chief Engineer Bob Murphy spoke up from his station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, we don't know what we're flying into. That signal could be a trap. Or worse, we could arrive just in time to get ourselves killed by whatever destroyed an entire planet." Jake understood their fear. He was scared too, but he also remembered the lessons from Earth's history. Every time good people had chosen to do nothing while others suffered, the results had been terrible. Maybe humanity was not ready for galactic warfare. Or maybe they would all die in the next few days. But they had to try. "I know the risks," Jake said. "Right, but someone out there is calling for help." "If we were the ones dying, wouldn't we want someone?" To answer, the crew was quiet for a moment. Then one by one, they turned back to their stations and began preparing for the jump to hyperspace. The UES. Defiant turned toward the dying star system and accelerated into the darkness between worlds, carrying humanity's first warriors toward their destiny among the stars. The jump to hyperspace took 18 hours. Captain Jake Morrison spent most of that time in the ship's small briefing room, studying everything they knew about the alien distress signal. The mathematics told a simple story. Millions of people were dying, and the killing was getting faster. Lieutenant Amy Davis brought him coffee that tasted like motor oil. The ship's food systems were not designed for long missions. "Any word from Earth Command?" Jake asked. "Still nothing, sir? But I've been monitoring other signals in this region of space. There's a lot of communication traffic near that star system. It's multiple species, all using similar distress frequencies." Jake looked up from his datapad. "Multiple species?" "Yes, sir. It looks like whatever is attacking that world has hit other places too. The signals are coming from at least 6 different star systems." Jake felt his stomach turn cold. This was not just one planet under attack. This was a war that covered multiple star systems, and humanity was flying straight into the middle of it with one small patrol ship, the UES. Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and immediately every sensor on the ship started screaming warnings. "Holy hell," whispered Chief Engineer Bob Murphy from his station. The main screen showed a scene from Nightmare. The system's 4th planet glowed with fires that could be seen from space. Hundreds of black ships moved in perfect formations around the dying world, each one the size of a city block. They moved like insects, systematic and emotionless, covering every inch of the planet's surface. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the debris field that stretched across millions of miles of space. The wreckage of what had once been a massive fleet floated between the planets, its twisted metal and frozen atmosphere marking the graves of thousands of defenders who had already died trying to stop this attack. Captain called Ensign Pete Collins from the sensor station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures from those black ships. Whatever weapons they're using, they're unlike anything in our databases." Jake studied the tactical display. The enemy. Ships were huge, but they moved slowly and seemed focused on the planet below. Maybe, if they were very careful, the Defiant could get close enough to help any survivors. "Take us in slowly," he ordered. "Minimal power. Try to look like a piece of debris." As they moved deeper into the system, more details became clear. The planet's cities were gone, replaced by strange geometric patterns carved into the ground. The black ships worked in groups, using energy beams to slice through mountains and drain the oceans. They were not just conquering this world. They were consuming it. "Captain, I'm detecting a weak signal from the planet's surface," Amy reported. "It's using the same mathematical patterns as the original distress call. Put it through." The speakers crackled with static, then a voice came through. It was clearly alien, with sounds no human throat could make, but the universal translator tried its best to convert the words, "Known vessel. This is Commander Vex High of the Zephyrian Defense Force. If you have received our distress beacon, please respond. We're the last military unit on the planet. We have perhaps hours remaining before our position is overrun." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all young, barely out of the academy. None of them had signed up for a war against aliens, but they were here now, and people were dying. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Defiant," he said into the communication system. "We received your distress call. What is your situation?" There was a long pause. When the alien voice returned, it sounded shocked. "Earth, the primitive world from Sector 7. But your species has barely achieved faster than light travel. Why have you come here?" Jake felt a flash of anger. Primitive. Earth had built starships, developed weapons that could crack planets, and created technologies that most people could not even understand. But he pushed down his irritation. Now was not the time for hurt feelings. "We came because you asked for help," he said simply. Another pause. "Captain Morrison, you must leave immediately. The Void Swarm has weapons that can destroy your ship in seconds. They have already eliminated the combined fleets of 7 species. Your single vessel cannot possibly make a difference." Jake looked at the tactical display again. The alien was right. The Defiant was one small ship against hundreds of massive enemy vessels. In any sane universe, they would turn around and run back to Earth as fast as possible. But Jake remembered something. His grandfather had told him about the old wars on Earth. Sometimes, it said, being brave was not about being strong enough to win. Sometimes it was about being willing to fight even when you knew you would lose. "Commander Vexi, we're not leaving," Jake said. "Tell me about these Void Swarm ships. What are their weaknesses?" "Weaknesses, Captain. They have none. Machines perfectly designed for war. They adapt to every weapon we use against them. They learn from every tactic we try. They are death itself, given form and purpose." Jake smiled grimly. Machines that adapted and learned. That sounded familiar. Earth had been building artificial intelligence for decades. They knew how such systems worked, and more importantly, they knew how such systems could be broken. "Bob," he called to his engineer, "what's our weapon status?" Murphy checked his displays. "We've got standard plasma cannons, some nuclear missiles, and about 50,000 rounds of kinetic ammunition. Nothing that could scratch those big ships, sir." "What about our experimental systems?" Murphy's eyes lit up. "Well, we do have the new electronic warfare package. It was designed to disrupt enemy computers and communication systems." Jake nodded. "Electronic warfare. The one type of combat that machines often struggled with, especially if they relied heavily on network connections to coordinate their attacks." "Amy, can you get us close to one of those Void Swarm ships without being detected?" "Maybe, sir. If we approach from the shadow of that dead moon, we might get within a few thousand kilometers." "Do it, Bob. I want you to prepare every electronic warfare system we have. We're going to see if these perfect machines have any computer vulnerabilities." As the Defiant began its careful approach toward the enemy fleet, Jake opened a channel back to the alien commander on the planet below. "Commander Vexi, we're going to try something. When we do, be ready to attack any Void Swarm ships that start acting strangely." "Captain Morrison, what could your tiny ship possibly do against?" Then Jake looked at the massive enemy vessels on his screen, each one bristling with weapons that could vaporize his ship in an instant. But he also thought about Earth's history, all the times when small groups of determined people had found ways to defeat much larger enemies. "We're going to show them that humans don't fight fair," he said. The Defiant moved into position. Behind the dead moon, all systems running silent. In a few minutes, they would either save this world or die trying. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn something new about the species from the small blue planet called Earth. The electronic warfare attack began at exactly 14:32 ship time. Chief Engineer Bob Murphy pressed the activation button. And every computer system on the UES Defiant screamed as it poured gigawatts of scrambled data toward the nearest void swarm. Vessel's Captain Jake Morrison watched the main screen holding his breath. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The black enemy ships continued their methodical destruction of the planet below, their energy beams cutting through cities like knives through paper. Then something changed. The first void swarm ship started, spinning. Slowly at first, then faster, its perfect formation breaking apart as it tumbled through space. A second ship began firing its weapons randomly, energy beams lashing out in all directions. A third ship simply stopped moving entirely, hanging dead in space like a giant metal coffin. "It's working," whispered Ensign Pete Collins from his sensor. "Station, their coordination network is breaking down." On the planet's surface, Commander Vex High watched through his bunker's cracked windows as impossible things began to happen. Void swarm ships that had been methodically destroying his world for months were now acting like confused animals. Some fired at each other. Others flew in circles or crashed into the ground. But the effect was spreading. As the human electronic attack disrupted the network connections between ships, the chaos moved through the void swarm fleet like a disease. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated minutes before were now attacking their own allies or flying into asteroids. "All remaining Zephyrian forces, attack now," Vex High commanded into his communicator. "Hit them while they're confused." The surviving defenders of Kepler 44 to be emerged from their hiding places. Ancient missile batteries that had been silent for weeks roared back to life. Fighter craft that had been grounded by overwhelming enemy firepower took to the skies. For the first time in months, the Zephyrians were fighting back. Aboard the Defiant, Jake watched the battle unfold with growing amazement. The electronic warfare attack had done more than just disrupt enemy communications. It had revealed something important about how the Void Swarm operated. "They're not individual ships," he realized aloud. "They're more like parts of a single giant machine. When we broke their network, we didn't just confuse them, we cut off their brain." Lieutenant Amy Davis looked up from her communication station. "Captain, I'm getting reports from other star systems." "Da-da! The same thing is happening everywhere the Void Swarm is active. Ships are going crazy, attacking each other, losing coordination." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If the Void Swarm was really one giant network spread across multiple star systems, then their small electronic attack had just crippled an enemy force that spanned hundreds of light years. But that also meant the enemy would adapt quickly. Machine intelligence always did. "How long do we have before they fix their systems?" he asked Bob. The engineer checked his instruments. "Maybe an hour, sir. 2 at most. They're already starting to establish new communication protocols." An hour. Jake looked at the tactical display, counting enemy ships. Even with many of them disabled or confused, there were still hundreds of Void Swarm vessels in this system alone. The Zephyrians were fighting bravely, but they were still vastly outnumbered. "Amy, send another message to Earth Command. Emergency priority. Tell them we've found a way to disrupt the enemy, but we need reinforcements immediately." If they send ships right now, it would take days for them to get here. Jake nodded grimly. Days they did not have. But maybe if they were very lucky and very clever, they could hold out until help arrived. "Bob, can we boost our electronic warfare systems? Make the attack stronger?" "I can try, sir, but there's a risk. If I push the systems too hard, we might burn out our own computers." "Do it." Bob worked frantically at his engineering station. Jake opened a channel to the Zephyrian commander on the planet below. "Commander Vex High, this is Captain Morrison. We bought you some time, but not much. Do you have any ships capable of interstellar travel?" "Few cargo vessels, Captain. Nothing with military capability. Load them with your people, as many as you can. Head for the outer edge of your star system and wait there. Captain, we cannot abandon our home world. Jake looked at the main screen, where fires still burned across the alien planet's surface. Commander, your world is already lost, but your people don't have to be. Sometimes retreat is the only way to survive. There was a long pause. When Vexai spoke again, his voice was heavy with pain. You are right, Captain. I will give the evacuation order. As the Zephyrian evacuation began, Jake turned his attention back to the tactical situation. The Void Swarm was adapting faster than expected. Many of their ships were already back online, and they were starting to coordinate their attacks again. But something else was happening too. New signals were appearing on the edge of the system. Ships were arriving, but they were not human vessels. Captain, I'm detecting multiple incoming fleets, Pete reported. 6 different species, all converging on this system.
Ow.
Jake felt a moment of hope. Maybe other civilizations had heard the distress call and were coming to help. That hope died when Amy checked the new arrivals' communications. Sir, they're not here to fight the Void Swarm, she said quietly. They're here to study whatever destroyed the Void Swarm fleet. They want to know how we did it. Jake stared at the sensor display. Representatives from advanced galactic civilizations were arriving to examine humanity's first military action in space. But none of them were offering to help with the actual fighting. They're treating this like a laboratory experiment, he realized. They want to see what the primitive humans can do against a superior enemy. The communications system crackled to life. Multiple alien voices began speaking at once, all using different translation protocols. The messages were polite but clear. They wanted to observe human military capabilities. They offered to record the battle for historical purposes. Some even offered to take samples of human technology after the fight was over. None of them offered to help save the dying planet below. Jake felt anger building in his chest. These advanced civilizations had the power to stop the Void Swarm easily. But they chose to watch instead, treating the destruction of an entire world as entertainment. Amy, open a channel to all the observer fleets, he ordered. Captain, you're transmitting to representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, she warned. Good, then they'll all hear this. Gah. Jake stood up and faced the main communications array. When he spoke, his voice carried across space to dozens of alien vessels filled with beings who considered themselves superior to humanity. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Defiant. You came here to study us, to see what the primitive humans would do when faced with impossible odds. Well, here's what we do. He turned to Bob. All weapons, full power. Target the largest Void Swarm ship. Sir, our weapons can't penetrate their shields. Then we'll get close enough that shields don't matter. Set course for ramming speed. The bridge fell silent. Jake's crew stared at him with a mixture of shock and understanding. He was ordering them to sacrifice their lives to destroy a single enemy ship. It was tactically insane. It was also completely human. You don't have to follow this order, Jake said quietly to his crew. Anyone who wants to evacuate to the observer ships can do so now. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It just turned back to their stations and began preparing for their final attack as the Defiant accelerated toward the massive Void Swarm command ship. Jake opened one last transmission to the galaxy's observers. You want to know what makes humans different? He said. We don't fight to win. We fight because it's right. And we'd rather die fighting than live watching others suffer.
Ow.
The small human ship raced toward its target, weapons blazing, carrying 30 people who had chosen to show the galaxy what courage looked like. The UES Defiant was 3 kilometers away from the massive Void Swarm command ship when something impossible happened. Space around them began to twist and bend, and suddenly the small human vessel was not alone. Captain Jake Morrison stared at his sensors in disbelief. Dozens of new ships were appearing out of hyperspace, all of them flying Earth flags. But these were not patrol vessels like his own. These were warships, massive and deadly, bristling with weapons he had never seen before. This is Admiral Lisa Carter aboard the UES Constitution, came a voice over the communications system. Captain Morrison, please adjust your course. We'll take it from here. Jake's mouth fell open. Admiral Carter was a legend in Earth's military. She had fought in the Mars Uprising and commanded the defense of Luna Station. But more importantly, she was supposed to be on Earth, not 40 light-years away in an alien star system. "Admiral, how did you get here so fast?" he managed to ask. "We've been tracking your mission since you left Earth, Captain. When we received your first report about the alien distress call, we immediately prepared a response fleet. We've been traveling through hyperspace for the past 18 hours? Jake looked at the tactical display as more and more human ships appeared. There were battleships larger than city blocks, carriers launching squadrons of fighters and destroyers moving in perfect attack formations. This was not just a rescue mission. This was an invasion force. "Admiral, there are observer fleets from other species watching this battle," Jake warned. "I know, Captain. Let them watch. It's time the galaxy learned what humans can do when we're properly motivated." The human fleet spread out across the star system like a steel net. Admiral Carter's flagship, the Constitution, is a monster of a ship with armor thick enough to stop asteroid impacts and weapons that could crack moons in half. Around it moved dozens of smaller vessels, each one more powerful than anything the Zephyrians had ever built. But Jake noticed something strange about the fleet's composition. These ships were not designed for exploration or peaceful contact. They were built for one purpose: war. Earth had been preparing for galactic conflict long before they knew any aliens existed. Captain Morris and Admiral Carter continued. "Electronic warfare attack gave us valuable intelligence about the enemy. We're going to expand on your tactics." "Expand how, Admiral?" "You disrupted their local network. We're going to destroy their entire communication system across all star systems simultaneously." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The scale of what the Admiral was suggesting was enormous. The Void Swarm operated across hundreds of star systems. To attack their entire network at once would require coordination and firepower beyond anything he had imagined. "Admiral, how many ships did Earth send?" "This is just the first wave, Captain. We have fleets moving toward every system where the Void Swarm is active. Over 2,000 ships in total." 2,000 ships. Jake realized that. Earth had been building a galactic navy in secret for years. While other species developed peaceful technologies, humans had been preparing for war on a cosmic scale. The observer fleets from other civilizations were getting nervous. Jake could see them on his sensors moving to safer distances as the human armada deployed. Some were sending urgent messages, probably reporting back to their homeworlds that the primitive Earth species had somehow assembled a fleet that rivaled their own military forces. Colonel Amy Rodriguez arrived on the Constitution shuttle along with a team of Marine engineers. She was a small woman with scars on her hands and the cold eyes of someone who had seen too much combat. "Captain Morrison," she said as she stepped onto the Defiance bridge, "I need to install some new equipment on your ship. Your electronic warfare systems worked better than expected, but we need to boost their range." "What kind of equipment?" Amy smiled, and Jake decided he did not want to know what she was thinking. The kind that Earth officially doesn't have. As Amy's team worked on upgrading the Defiance systems, Jake watched the human fleet position itself throughout the star system. They moved with precision that impressed even the alien observers. Every ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. This was not improvisation. This was the execution of a plan that had been years in the making. Captain Lieutenant Amy Davis called from her station. "I'm receiving a transmission from one of the observer fleets. It's the Altarian Republic. They want to speak with Admiral Carter." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was smooth and cultured, speaking perfect English with only a slight accent. "Admiral Carter, this is Ambassador Zethkri of the Altarian Diplomatic Corps. We are concerned about the aggressive nature of your fleet deployment. Surely this level of military force is unnecessary against the Void Swarm." Admiral Carter's response was broadcast across all frequencies, ensuring that every observer fleet heard her words. "Ambassador, the Void Swarm has destroyed 7 civilizations in the past year. Billions of people are dead, yet none of your advanced species have lifted a finger to stop them. You prefer to study the problem rather than solve it. Admiral, violence is not the answer to every problem. There are diplomatic solutions, peaceful negotiations. Can't negotiate with machines that exist only to kill Ambassador. Welcome to Try. Send a diplomatic mission to the Void Swarm command ship. See how that works out? The communication channel went silent. Jake could imagine the alien ambassador struggling to find a response to Admiral Carter's blunt words. The attack began exactly 1 hour later. It was not like any battle Jake had ever studied in military history. There were no grand charges or desperate last stands. Instead, it was a methodical dismantling of the enemy force using tactics that the Void Swarm could not counter. Human ships used electronic warfare on a massive scale, jamming enemy communications across multiple star systems. Simultaneously, they deployed weapons that the galaxy had never seen, computer viruses that turned enemy ships against each other, electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic systems from the inside, and kinetic bombardments that struck with the force of nuclear weapons. But the most terrifying thing was how efficiently the humans worked. They did not fight with the passion of desperate defenders or the honor of noble warriors. They fought like exterminators dealing with an infestation. Cold, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. Commander Vex High, watching from his evacuation ship, at the edge of the system, sent a message to Captain Morrison. Captain, your species fights unlike any civilization we have ever encountered. You show no mercy, no hesitation. How do you maintain such discipline in battle? Jake thought about the question carefully before answering. Commander, humans learned a long time ago that the universe is not a safe place. We've been fighting for survival since we first picked up rocks to defend ourselves. War isn't something we do, it's something we are. As the battle raged across the star system, the observer fleets began to withdraw. They had come expecting to study primitive human tactics. Instead, they were witnessing the systematic destruction of an enemy force that had terrified the galaxy for over a year. The Void Swarm. For all their technological superiority, had made one critical mistake. They had attacked a species that considered warfare to be the most important science of all. By the end of the day, not a single Void Swarm ship remained operational in the Kepler 442 system. The black machines that had seemed unstoppable were now nothing but debris floating in space. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Earth had revealed its military capabilities to the galaxy, and there would be consequences. Some species would want to become allies. Others would see humanity as the new threat that needed to be contained. The age of human isolation was over. The galaxy's newest predators had announced their presence, and nothing would ever be the same. 6 months after the battle at Kepler 442b, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Earth Defense Station, watching ships from a dozen different species arrive for what the galaxy was calling the Human Question Conference. Station orbited Earth's moon, a massive structure built from the remains of destroyed Void Swarm vessels. It was both a monument to humanity's first galactic victory and a warning to anyone who might threaten Earth in the future. Admiral Lisa Carter joined him at the window, uniform now decorated with medals from grateful alien governments, but her expression was troubled. The Zephyrians want to give us their entire star system as payment for saving them, she said quietly. The Andromedan Council is offering exclusive trade agreements. 3 different species want to hire us as their military protectors. Jake nodded. He had expected this. Fear and gratitude often look the same from a distance. And the others? The Altarian Republic is organizing a defensive alliance against us. The Centauri Federation thinks we're too dangerous to be left alone. The High Court of Vega wants to place limits on human military expansion. Jake watched a sleek Altarian diplomatic vessel dock with the station. Through its transparent hull, he could see alien figures in flowing robes, probably discussing how to contain the violent humans without actually fighting them. What about the Void Swarm? He asked. Any sign of them rebuilding? Admiral Carter's expression grew darker. That's the real problem, Jake. We didn't just defeat them. We destroyed them completely, across 700 star systems in less than a week. The galaxy is terrified of what that means. Jake understood. Humans had not just won a battle. They had demonstrated the ability to wage war on a galactic scale, with an efficiency that shocked even their allies. The Zephyrians were grateful, but they were also afraid. Commander Vex-High arrived at the station later that day, representing what remained of his people. The once-proud military leader looked older now, his blue scales dulled by months of refugee camps and temporary shelters. "Captain Morrison," he said as they met in the station's diplomatic quarters, "my people owe you everything. Without human intervention, we would be extinct." "You don't owe us anything, Commander. We did what anyone should do when they see genocide happening." Vex-High tilted his head, a gesture Jake had learned meant confusion among his species. "But Captain, that is exactly why the galaxy fears you. Most civilizations would have calculated the costs and benefits. They would have held conferences and formed committees, and discussed the problem for years. Humans simply arrived and started, killing the enemy. No hesitation, no doubt." Jake walked to the window overlooking Earth. The blue planet looked peaceful from this distance, but he knew better. Down there, weapons factories worked around the clock. Shipyards built new warships, faster than any alien industry could match. Training centers prepared soldiers for battles that might never come. "Commander, let me ask you something. If the Void Swarm returns tomorrow, who would you call for help?" Vex-High was quiet for a long moment. "I would call Earth," he admitted. "Even though your species terrifies me, I would call Earth. That's the problem, isn't it? The galaxy needs us, but they're afraid of us." The conference began 2 days later in the station's main assembly hall. Representatives from 43 different civilizations attended, along with observers from dozens more. Jake sat in the human delegation, watching alien diplomats who had spent centuries avoiding conflict, suddenly forced to discuss military matters. Ambassador Helen Davis, Earth's first galactic diplomat, stood to address the assembly. She was a small woman with gray hair and a grandmother's smile, chosen specifically because she looked harmless. "Friends," she began, using the universal translator to speak in dozens of languages simultaneously. "We are here because the galaxy has discovered that humanity approaches conflict differently than most species. Some of you see this as a threat, others see it as an opportunity. I believe both perspectives miss the point." She touched a control, and the room's holographic display showed images from the Void Swarm War. Burning planets, refugee ships, massive fleet of black machines that had consumed entire civilizations. The point is that evil exists in the universe. It comes in many forms, but it always has the same goal: to destroy everything good and beautiful and peaceful. When that evil appears, someone has to fight it. Someone has to be willing to do terrible things to stop even more terrible things from happening. An Altarian representative stood up. "Ambassador Davis, surely there are alternatives to violence. Diplomatic solutions, technological solutions, peaceful resistance." Ambassador Davis smiled sadly. "Representative, how many diplomatic messages did your government send to the Void Swarm? How many technological solutions did the Andromedon Council develop? How many peaceful protests did the Centauri Federation organize?" The alien diplomat sat down without answering. "Humans are not violent because we enjoy war," Ambassador Davis continued. "We are violent because we understand what happens when good people do nothing while evil spreads. We've seen it on our own world many times throughout our history." Jake watched the alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Many of their species had evolved beyond war by avoiding conflict entirely. They had achieved peace by running away from anything dangerous, leaving their problems for others to solve. The conference lasted for 3 weeks. In the end, no formal decisions were made. The galaxy could not agree on how to handle humanity's military power. Some species wanted humans as allies. Others wanted them as hired protection. A few wanted them contained or controlled. But Jake noticed something interesting in the final days of the conference. More distress signals were arriving at the station. Pirates attacking trade routes, slavers raiding peaceful colonies, warlords expanding their territories into neutral space. For over a year, the galaxy had been too focused on the Void Swarm threat to notice these smaller problems. Now that the machines were gone, all the old evils were returning. The peaceful civilizations had no idea how to deal with them. "Captain Morrison," Commander Vex-High said as the conference ended, "what will humans do now? Will you become conquerors like the species we all fear?" Jake thought about the question as he watched the last diplomatic ships leave the station. Down on Earth, factories were still building warships. Training centers were still preparing soldiers. Humanity was still getting ready for the next war. No, Commander? We won't become conquerors, but we also won't ignore calls for help. When evil shows up again, and it will show up again, we'll be ready. A new distress signal arrived that evening. Pirates were attacking mining colonies in the Rigel system. Local government was asking for help. Their own security forces had been overwhelmed. Admiral Carter looked at Jake with a tired smile. Well, Captain, ready for another rescue mission? Jake looked out at the stars, where somewhere in the darkness, people were suffering and calling for help. The galaxy might fear humanity's warriors, but they needed them too. Yes, Admiral, let's go save someone else. The human fleet departed Earth the next morning, carrying soldiers and weapons toward another distant crisis. Behind them, the blue world continued its quiet rotation, home to the galaxy's newest guardians in the vast darkness between stars. Other threats were stirring. Ancient evils that had slept while the Void Swarm ruled were beginning to wake. The galaxy would need its war giants again soon, but humanity would be ready. They always were.